want to receive your applause without acknowledging that I'm quite well aware there are many in this audience, I dare say, who may yet disagree with that. And there were legitimate reasons for wanting to topple Saddam Hussein, for worrying about the threat that he might pose to his region. I understand all that. But ladies and gentlemen, one of the causes of that war, the one that may have tipped the balance toward what I at least regard as a mistake, was the fact that our economy and our national security are linked to the continued flows of oil into the world market. And though we do not get most of our oil from the Persian Gulf, the world as a whole does, and the world oil market is so interconnected that a sudden disruption of oil from that region would have catastrophic security and economic consequences. And so the desire to address that was intimately connected. I'm not saying it was the only reason, I'll repeat, but it was intimately connected to the vulnerability we had to make that mistake. Now, what about Afghanistan? We should have invaded Afghanistan. That's where the attack of 9/11 originated. But why, when the perpetrator of that attack, Osama bin Laden, was cornered and trapped and surrounded, why didn't we go in and get him? Well, here is the answer. The Foreign Relations Committee, led by Senator John Kerry of this state, just documented this fully, and the former intelligence and military experts who were there at the time have talked about this, because at the time our nation's leadership was focused on invading Iraq. I don't know if they were worried about the impact of a large number of casualties of going into the caves of Tora Bora, diminishing the nation's appetite for an invasion in a war of choice. But certainly the intelligence assets and the planning capability and the imminent transfer of military assets to the place where the oil was located, that distracted us. And so the person who perpetrated the attack was effectively allowed to escape. So as long as we remain dependent on these carbon-based fuels, oil and coal chief among them, we are going to be vulnerable to taking our eyes off the ball and making gross mistakes that harm our country. Now, the economic crisis. We need millions of new jobs. Just as the Industrial Revolution led to tremendous surges of employment in new occupations that had been unknown, so this historic transition to renewable energy can put our people to work in jobs that cannot be outsourced. So the solutions to all three of these crises are also woven together. Now, after solar and wind power, the next chapter focuses on a renewable source of energy that is not as well known or as well understood. It's called geothermal power. And geothermal power has been thought of in the context of these places on the surface of the earth where hot water bubbles up, like Old Faithful at Yellowstone. And there are dozens of those around the world. But the new technologies for what is called enhanced geothermal power is very different. The new drilling technology that ironically has come out of the frenzy of oil and gas exploration allows us to drill much more deeply into the earth. And you know, after you go 100 feet down or so, the average temperature in the earth at that level is about 59 degrees Fahrenheit on average around the world. So geothermal ground source heat pumps are a very valuable and effective source of energy. But then when you go deeper, with every additional foot you drill, it gets warmer, because you get closer to that enormous source of heat energy in the mantle of the Earth and in the core, at the core of the Earth, thousands and thousands of degrees hot, that can be used as a virtually unlimited source of energy. There is, according to the experts here in the United States, with geothermal energy just a few kilometers down, virtually everywhere. It's a little closer to the surface in the west than in the east, but virtually everywhere, a few kilometers down, there is the equivalent of a 30,000-year supply of electrical energy for the United States. And they circulate a fluid down, again, use it to boil water. So often it all comes back to making steam for turning generators, Faraday's law, and generating electricity. We can use that source of energy, and guess what? It's available in developing countries as well as developed countries. The old divide between rich and poor doesn't apply there, and this technology needs to be developed in ways that allow it to be shared as a source of energy around the world on an equitable basis. Now the next chapter focuses on biomass, and this is a source of energy that has also been somewhat misunderstood because our early efforts to turn plants into fuel have taken the form of transforming corn into ethanol. And that has been something of a disappointment because the energy balance and the cost balance has not been as favorable as had been hoped, and indeed in practice it is often slightly negative. It has also put some pressure on food prices at the margin, and whenever the enthusiasm for ethanol is highest is when the oil price is high, and whenever the oil price is high, food prices are high, because there are so many petroleum inputs and natural gas inputs into the modern food supply. And as a result, this collision between ethanol and food prices has also contributed to the disappointment. But the good news is, as science has continued to move forward, the second generation and third generation forms of biomass, which can use plants that are not food crops, that grow on land that isn't used for growing food, that can be converted into fuel far more efficiently and cost effectively than using starches and using corn in particular. These new forms of biomass fuel are very promising indeed. In many parts of the world, they have decided not to convert it into liquid fuels, but instead have decided to convert it directly into electricity. And we in the United States are now beginning to actively explore that option as well. And of course, in theory, and if it's done correctly in practice, the CO2 that results from the burning of that transformed plant matter is recycled into next year's crop, with some losses due to the conversion, but it is a far preferable alternative. And so biomass is going to play an important role as well. Now, the next two chapters focus on two solutions that are very controversial, but they need to be examined with a clear mind. One is on carbon capture and sequestration, and you've all heard about it. If it were possible to use a technology that would capture the gaseous emissions from a coal plant and trap the CO2 before it goes into the atmosphere, well, that'd be wonderful, because then we could just keep burning the coal and not worry about global warming. But there turns out to be a big problem.